The moon hung low over Blackthorn, a secluded European village nestled between dense forests and jagged mountains. By day, it was picturesque, a place of cobblestone streets, medieval architecture, and winding rivers. But by night, it belonged to the vampires. Blackthorn wasn't just a quaint village, it was a sanctuary for the nocturnal immortals who had made the town their hidden haven for centuries. In the heart of the village, Count Adrien Valis stood on the balcony of his centuries-old mansion, his sharp features illuminated by the pale moonlight. His crimson cloak billowed slightly in the cool breeze as he surveyed his domain. Blackthorn was thriving, its mortal population unwittingly providing sustenance for its vampiric rulers while enjoying the peace and prosperity ensured by their undead overseers. Adrien took a sip from his chalice, the thick, warm liquid inside a blend of wine and fresh blood. Life, or rather, unlife, was good. But that night, the tranquility of Blackthorn shattered. A piercing hum filled the air, accompanied by flashes of eerie blue light. Adrien's keen senses picked up the disturbance before the others. He turned his eyes skyward and saw them, massive, triangular ships descending through the cloud cover, their surfaces reflecting the moonlight like mirrors. The invaders had arrived. In a dilapidated tavern at the edge of the village, Lucy Moreau, one of Blackthorn's youngest and most rebellious vampires, was arm wrestling a burly lumberjack she'd lured in for sport. Her fiery red hair framed a mischievous smirk as she slammed the man's arm onto the table, earning cheers from the gathered mortals. "I'm starting to think you lot don't understand the meaning of challenge," she teased, standing and tossing her fiery locks back. The sudden hum and flashing lights drew her attention. Stepping outside, she joined the crowd of curious villagers staring up at the descending crafts. One of the ships halted midair, its underside opening to reveal sleek, metallic pods that shot toward the village like missiles. Lucy's grin faded. "Adrien's not going to like this," she muttered. The pods struck with thunderous impacts, embedding themselves in the streets, courtyards, and fields. From the smoking craters emerged tall, insectoid beings clad in gleaming armor. Their multifaceted eyes glowed a vibrant green, and their sharp mandibles clicked as they raised plasma rifles. They were the Dravix, a nomadic alien race known for their brutal campaigns to conquer resource-rich planets. The leader of the Dravix, Commander XYRL, stepped forward, his mandibles clicking rhythmically. "Humans of this primitive settlement, your world is ours. Surrender now, or face obliteration." The vampires of Blackthorn, blending seamlessly with the mortal population, exchanged bewildered glances. "Humans?" Adrien, watching from his mansion, couldn't help but chuckle darkly. These creatures had made a grave miscalculation. Lucy, however, saw an opportunity. "Hey, Bugface," she called out, strolling into the square. Her fangs glinted as she grinned. "You think you're taking over our village? You're in for a surprise." The Dravix turned their weapons on her. Lucy's smirk widened. In a blur of motion, she closed the distance, effortlessly disarming two aliens and smashing their heads together like ripe melons. The crowd gasped, and for a moment, the Dravix hesitated. Commander XYRL narrowed his glowing eyes. "This is no human." "What are you?" Lucy wiped alien ichor from her hands. "Your worst nightmare." Back at the mansion, Adrien summoned his council of elder vampires. They gathered in a grand hall lit by candelabras and adorned with portraits of Blackthorn's vampiric lineage. Among them was Theron, a brooding, hulking vampire who had served as Adrien's enforcer for centuries, and Celine, the council's voice of reason and a master strategist. Adrien addressed them calmly, though his crimson eyes betrayed a flicker of amusement. "It seems our village has become the latest target of an alien invasion. They think we're humans." Theron growled. "Do they mean to harvest us as cattle, like we do with mortals?" "Perhaps," Celine mused. "But their technology is advanced. If they realize we're not human, they may escalate their aggression." Adrien raised a hand. "Let us not act rashly. They may have strength in numbers, but they are unprepared for what we are. This can be entertaining. Meanwhile, chaos erupted in Blackthorn. The Dravix soldiers were ruthless, systematically capturing humans and placing them in containment pods. The vampires, though curious, remained mostly hidden, watching the aliens' methods. Lucy, however, was having none of it. From the rooftop of the tavern, she leapt onto an unsuspecting Dravix soldier, snapping its neck with a satisfying crunch. "You're not very good at this whole invasion thing, are you?" she taunted, dodging a plasma shot and returning fire with the stolen rifle. Her antics drew the attention of more Dravix. They surrounded her, weapons raised, but before they could fire, Theron arrived. With a feral roar, the massive vampire tore through the aliens like paper, their plasma weapons barely scorching his ancient, battle-hardened flesh. Adrien watched the scene from afar, sipping from his chalice. "Let her have her fun," he said to Celine, who had joined him on the balcony. "She'll expose us," Celine warned. "They'll realize we're not human." Adrien's lips curved into a sly smile. "Then we'll simply ensure they don't live long enough to tell anyone." As dawn approached, the vampires convened in the mansion's underground lair. Lucy, still energized from the night's skirmish, regaled the others with exaggerated tales of her heroics. Theron rolled his eyes, while Celine studied maps of the Dravix's movements. Adrien silenced the room with a raised hand. "The Dravix are formidable, but they are arrogant. They believe this is a simple conquest of mortals. We shall use that arrogance against them." Lucy leaned forward. "So what's the plan, boss?" Adrien's eyes gleamed. "We lure them into a false sense of victory. Let them believe they are succeeding. Then, when the moment is right, we remind them why Blackthorn has remained untouched for centuries." Celine added, "We'll also need to contain this. If the Dravix realize there's more to Earth than Blackthorn, they may summon reinforcements." "This ends here." The vampires nodded, their predatory instincts awakened. The invaders had made a critical mistake. They'd mistaken predators for prey. And as the first rays of sunlight touched Blackthorn, the vampires retreated to their coffins and crypts, ready to strike again the next night. The Dravix had no idea what horrors awaited them. The sun rose over Blackthorn, bathing the village in a deceptive calm. The Dravix, emboldened by their initial progress, patrolled the streets with mechanical efficiency. The containment pods, now filled with captured humans, hummed ominously in the village square. Commander XYRL stood at the edge of the largest pod, inspecting his prize. "These humans are weak," XYRL hissed, his mandibles clicking. "Their resistance is laughable. Soon, this settlement will fall, and their resources will fuel the Empire." One of his subordinates approached, their insectoid form trembling. "Commander, some of the humans appear to exhibit unusual strength and speed. Reports indicate they are resistant to our plasma weaponry." XYRL's eyes narrowed. "Outliers. Perhaps an advanced genetic variation. No matter. We shall dissect them once the conquest is complete." The Dravix had no idea they were being watched. In the shadows of the bell tower, Lucy crouched with her plasma rifle, her sharp eyes scanning the square. Beside her was Theron, his massive frame somehow blending into the darkness. He didn't like being out during daylight hours, even in the shadows, but Lucy's insistence had forced his hand. "You're reckless," Theron muttered. "We should wait until nightfall." Lucy smirked. "Where's the fun in that? Besides, we're just gathering intel." Theron growled, his patience thin. "If they spot us." "They won't," Lucy interrupted, focusing on the Dravix soldiers below. "We've got the element of surprise. And honestly, these bugs aren't as tough as they think." Theron didn't reply, but his glowering silence spoke volumes. Lucy tapped her communicator, linked to Adrien's hidden lair. "Boss, they're getting cocky. They think they've already won." Adrien's calm voice crackled through. "Good. Pride precedes the fall. Continue observing, but do not engage. We strike tonight. Lucy sighed but nodded. Fine. But if one of them so much as looks at me funny. Lucy, Adrien warned, his tone icy. Do not jeopardize the plan. Night fell, and the vampires emerged. Adrien's council had devised a two-pronged strategy: disrupt the Dravix's operations while feeding them misinformation about the nature of Blackthorn's resistance. The goal was to exploit their arrogance and delay reinforcements. Celine, ever the tactician, had identified the weakest points in the Dravix's patrol patterns. Their communication hub is vulnerable, she explained, pointing to a map of the village. We destroy it, and they'll be forced to rely on scattered squads. That's when we pick them off. Theron grunted in approval. Divide and conquer. Adrien turned to Lucy. You and Theron will handle the hub. Celine and I will disrupt their supply lines. Keep them guessing. Lucy saluted mockingly. Got it, boss. Adrien's gaze lingered on her. And, Lucy, control yourself. The Dravix communication hub was a gleaming tower of alien technology erected in the center of the village square. Pulsing with green light, it emitted a steady hum that filled the night air. Lucy and Theron approached silently, using the shadows to their advantage. Lucy inspected the structure, her lips curling into a grin. Looks fancy. Think it's flammable? Theron ignored her, focusing on the patrolling Dravix. Stay quiet. Relax, Lucy whispered, pulling a small incendiary device from her belt. This'll be easy. She moved swiftly, planting the device at the base of the tower. Theron kept watch, his keen senses attuned to the slightest movement. As Lucy worked, a pair of Dravix soldiers approached, their weapons scanning the area. Theron acted without hesitation. In a blur of motion, he grabbed one of the aliens, snapping its neck before it could react. The second soldier managed a single, startled screech before Lucy plunged her dagger into its thorax. Subtle, Lucy quipped, wiping alien ichor from her blade. Theron glared at her. Hurry up. Moments later, the device was armed. Lucy and Theron retreated, watching from a distance as the tower erupted in flames. The explosion sent shockwaves through the village, and the Dravix scrambled in confusion. Lucy clapped Theron on the back. See? Told you it'd be easy. Theron muttered something unintelligible and stalked off. Elsewhere, Adrien and Celine infiltrated the Dravix's supply depot. The aliens had established a makeshift base in an abandoned barn, storing energy cells, weapons, and containment pods. Adrien's crimson eyes glinted as he surveyed the area. Efficient, he murmured. But predictable. Celine nodded. We disable their supplies, and they'll be forced to retreat or consolidate. Adrien gestured for her to proceed. Celine moved with practiced precision, sabotaging the energy cells while Adrien kept watch. When a group of Dravix entered the barn, Adrien stepped forward, his regal demeanor undiminished. The aliens raised their weapons, but Adrien's voice stopped them. Foolish creatures, he said smoothly. You invade a realm you do not understand. One of the Dravix hesitated, their mandibles clicking nervously. Adrien's presence was unnerving, even to beings who had conquered countless worlds. With a flick of his wrist, Adrien unleashed his power. The Dravix froze, their movements sluggish as if trapped in molasses. Celine finished her sabotage, and the two vampires vanished into the night as the depot erupted in flames. The vampires' coordinated attacks left the Dravix reeling. Commander XYRL convened his officers in a makeshift command center, his frustration palpable. These humans are more resourceful than anticipated, he growled. Their resistance is unusual. One officer hesitated. Commander, there are reports of strange behavior among the targets. Some exhibit abilities beyond human norms. XYRL slammed his clawed hand onto the table. Irrelevant. Increase patrols. Double the containment efforts. This settlement will fall. In the mansion's underground lair, Adrien and his council assessed their progress. The Dravix were destabilized, but the vampires knew they couldn't maintain the charade forever. The aliens would eventually discover the truth. Celine voiced what everyone was thinking. They're growing desperate. It's only a matter of time before they call for reinforcements. Adrien nodded. Then we end this before they have the chance. Tomorrow night, we strike their command ship. Theron frowned. A direct assault? Adrien's eyes gleamed. Precisely. We'll use their own hubris against them. They expect a scattered resistance. We'll show them the full force of Blackthorn. Lucy grinned. Now you're talking. As the vampires prepared for their final assault, the Dravix tightened their grip on the village. Patrols increased, and the aliens deployed advanced drones to detect and neutralize threats. Blackthorn became a battlefield, its cobblestone streets littered with evidence of the escalating conflict. But the vampires were undeterred. They had spent centuries honing their predatory skills, and now, for the first time, they had a common enemy. Blackthorn's immortals were united, their predatory instincts sharpened. As the sun rose, the village fell silent, the Dravix unaware that the coming night would seal their fate. The vampires were ready, and this time, there would be no mercy. The night began with an eerie stillness, as though the entire village of Blackthorn held its breath. Above, the Dravix command ship loomed, its sleek, triangular structure hovering ominously in the darkened sky. Lights flickered across its surface, signaling preparations for what the vampires suspected would be a full-scale assault. The invaders were on edge, their forces spread thin and their morale shaken by the relentless sabotage orchestrated by Blackthorn's undead residents. Adrien Valis stood in the mansion's grand hall, his crimson eyes scanning the gathered vampires. Every capable immortal in Blackthorn had answered the call. The room was alive with tension, their collective strength and fury palpable. Adrien raised his chalice in a silent toast, his voice cutting through the silence. This is no longer a matter of survival, he declared. These invaders thought they could conquer us, mistaking us for mere mortals. Tonight, we show them the true nature of Blackthorn. Cheers erupted, a low, guttural sound that echoed through the stone chamber. Lucy leaned against a column, her plasma rifle slung casually over her shoulder. She grinned at Theron, who stood stoic as ever. Ready to teach these bugs a lesson? Theron snorted. Let's hope you don't get yourself killed in the process. Celine approached Adrien, a map of the command ship glowing in her hand. We've identified their weak points. The power core is heavily shielded, but if we disable their external defenses, we can breach it. From there, it's a matter of planting the explosives and escaping. Adrien nodded. Good. Let's move. They've overstayed their welcome. The vampires split into 3 teams, each with a specific role in the assault. Adrien led the main force, aiming to draw the Dravix's attention. Celine's team was tasked with disabling the ship's external defenses, while Lucy and Theron infiltrated the command center to plant the explosives. As the vampires emerged from their lair, the Dravix patrols were ready. Plasma bolts illuminated the night as the first skirmishes erupted in the cobblestone streets. Adrien moved with supernatural grace, his crimson cloak billowing as he cut through the enemy ranks. His sword, forged centuries ago and infused with his vampiric power, glowed faintly as it carved through armor and flesh alike. Hold the line, he shouted, his voice carrying over the din of battle. Celine's team navigated the chaos with precision. Using their superior speed and stealth, they evaded detection, making their way to the ship's external defense array. The system was a sprawling network of turrets and energy shields, all powered by a single hub. Celine gestured for her team to fan out. Take out the guards quietly. We can't afford to trip the alarms. In seconds, the vampires descended on the unsuspecting Dravix, dispatching them with brutal efficiency. Celine hacked into the hub's controls, her sharp mind deciphering the alien technology with surprising ease. Almost there, she murmured, her fingers flying across the console. Above, the command ship's defenses began to falter. Turrets powered down, and the shimmering shields flickered before disappearing entirely. Celine smiled grimly. The path is clear. Inside the ship, Lucy and Theron moved through the labyrinthine corridors with practiced silence. The interior was cold and sterile, its walls pulsating faintly with energy. The air smelled metallic, tinged with the faint hum of machinery. Lucy glanced at Theron, her voice barely a whisper. How much you want to bet their leader's even uglier than the grunts? Theron didn't reply, his focus unbroken. They reached the command center, a vast chamber dominated by a glowing, spherical core. Around it, Dravix officers barked commands in their alien tongue, oblivious to the intruders. Lucy grinned, gripping her plasma rifle. Let's make some noise. Before Theron could protest, Lucy opened fire, plasma bolts tearing through the room. The Dravix scrambled, their initial confusion giving Lucy and Theron the advantage. Theron charged forward, his massive frame a blur as he tore through the alien soldiers with brutal efficiency. As the last Dravix fell, Lucy approached the core, pulling out the explosives. This is almost too easy, she quipped, setting the timer. Her words proved premature. A deafening roar filled the chamber as the doors slammed shut, and Commander XYRL stepped into the room. His massive form dwarfed the other Dravix, his armor bristling with weapons and his glowing eyes burning with rage. You dare defile my command center? XYRL hissed, his voice reverberating through the chamber. Theron stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. We've faced worse. The battle that followed was nothing short of cataclysmic. XYRL's movements were impossibly fast, his plasma blades cutting through the air with deadly precision. Lucy and Theron fought with everything they had, their vampiric strength and agility barely enough to keep the alien commander at bay. Theron grappled with XYRL, their clash shaking the room. Lucy darted around them, firing plasma shots and landing quick strikes with her dagger. Despite their efforts, XYRL was relentless, his strength seemingly endless. The timer on the explosives ticked down, the glowing numbers a grim reminder of their limited time. Theron! Lucy shouted, dodging a strike. We've got to get out of here. Theron growled, his fangs bared. Not until he's dead. With a final, desperate effort, Theron tackled XYRL, pinning him against the core. Go, he roared at Lucy. Lucy hesitated for a split second before bolting toward the exit. She turned back to see Theron delivering a devastating blow to XYRL, cracking his armor and driving him into the core. The ship shook violently as the core began to destabilize. Lucy sprinted through the corridors, narrowly avoiding collapsing debris and bursts of energy. She reached the ship's docking bay, where Adrien and Celine were waiting with the rest of the vampires. Where's Theron? Adrien demanded, his expression grim. Lucy shook her head, her voice tight. He didn't make it. Adrien's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. As the vampires boarded their escape craft, the Dravix command ship erupted in a blinding explosion, lighting up the night sky. The shockwave sent debris raining down, and the vampires watched in silence as their enemy's flagship was reduced to ashes. The remaining Dravix forces, now leaderless and scattered, fled Blackthorn. The vampires had won, but the cost was heavy. Back in the mansion's grand hall, the surviving vampires gathered to honor Theron's sacrifice. Adrien stood before them, his voice somber yet resolute. Tonight, we faced an enemy unlike any other. They underestimated us, mistaking us for prey. But Blackthorn stands, thanks to our strength and unity. Let this victory remind the world that we are not to be trifled with. The vampires raised their glasses in a solemn toast. Lucy sat quietly in the corner, her usual bravado subdued. She stared into her drink, her mind replaying the final moments of the battle. Celine approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. He chose his fate, she said softly. And he wouldn't want you to blame yourself. Lucy nodded, her jaw tight. Next time, I'm not leaving anyone behind. Celine gave her a small smile. Next time, they won't stand a chance. As the first rays of dawn broke over Blackthorn, the vampires retreated to their coffins, exhausted but victorious. The invaders were gone, and the village was safe, for now. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged peaks surrounding Blackthorn, its golden rays piercing the smoldering remnants of the battlefield. The Dravix were gone, their command ship obliterated, and the few surviving invaders had scattered into the wilderness. For the first time in days, an uneasy calm settled over the village. In the mansion's underground lair, Adrien Valis sat in silence, his face an unreadable mask. The grand hall, which had been filled with the sound of rallying cries and strategic discussions, was now somber and quiet. Around him, the remaining vampires gathered, their faces etched with a mix of victory and loss. Adrien finally stood, his crimson cloak trailing behind him. We've won a battle, but this war is far from over. Celine, ever the strategist, stepped forward. The Dravix underestimated us, but now they know the truth. They'll report what they've seen to their empire. This will not be the last time we face them. Lucy leaned against a pillar, her fiery hair tangled and her plasma rifle hanging loosely at her side. Her usual grin was absent. So, what do we do? Sit around and wait for the next batch of space bugs to show up? Adrien's piercing gaze met hers. No. We prepare. Blackthorn has survived for centuries because we remain hidden. That must change. If we are to face this new threat, we cannot do so alone. Celine raised an eyebrow. You mean to unite the other covens? Adrien nodded. And more than that. We must bring together the supernatural and mortal realms. Humanity will need to know who its real allies are. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The vampires worked tirelessly to fortify Blackthorn, blending ancient knowledge with salvaged Dravix technology. The once secluded village began transforming into a hidden fortress, with advanced defenses and new strategies to ward off any future invasions. Lucy, meanwhile, found herself restless. She spent her nights patrolling the outskirts of Blackthorn, her sharp eyes scanning the skies for any sign of returning ships. Buckets of guilt weighed heavily on her after losing Theron, and she threw herself into action to avoid confronting her emotions. One night, as she walked the forest edge, she caught sight of something unusual, a faint, green glow emanating from the woods. Her instincts flared, and she approached cautiously, plasma rifle at the ready. What she found froze her in place. A battered, bloodied figure leaned against a tree, its massive frame unmistakable. It was Theron. His clothes were torn, and alien ichor mixed with his own blood, but he was alive, or as alive as a vampire could be. Theron! Lucy exclaimed, rushing to his side. He groaned, his voice a raspy growl. Took you long enough. Lucy knelt beside him, inspecting his wounds. How the hell did you survive that explosion? Theron smirked weakly. Didn't think I'd go down that easy, did you? With surprising strength, Theron grabbed Lucy's arm. Listen to me. I've seen what's coming. The Dravix, they're just the beginning. There's something bigger out there. Lucy's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Theron's grip tightened. Their empire, it's vast. The Dravix were only a scouting force. There are others, stronger, smarter, more dangerous. And they know about us now. Lucy swallowed hard, her mind racing. We have to warn Adrien. Theron nodded weakly, his strength fading. Go. I'll follow. Back in the mansion, Lucy burst into the grand hall, interrupting a strategy meeting. Adrien and Celine turned to her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and annoyance. What is it, Lucy? Adrien asked, his voice calm but firm. She took a deep breath, her words tumbling out in a rush. Theron's alive. He survived the explosion, and he says the Dravix were just the start. There's something bigger coming. The room fell silent. Adrien's eyes narrowed. Where is he? As if on cue, Theron limped into the hall, his massive frame filling the doorway. The gathered vampires stared in shock, murmurs rippling through the crowd. Adrien stepped forward, his expression unreadable. Theron. Explain. Theron recounted what he had learned. In the moments before the explosion, he had fought XYRL to a standstill. The alien commander had revealed snippets of the Dravix Empire's larger plan. Earth was not an isolated target. It was one of many worlds being evaluated for conquest, and the vampires of Blackthorn had drawn the attention of something far more dangerous than the Dravix scouting party. The Dravix were just the vanguard, Theron finished, his voice low. They serve something greater, a force that won't stop until it's consumed everything. Adrien wasted no time. He dispatched Celine to contact the other vampire covens, her mission to unite them under a single cause. Meanwhile, Lucy and Theron worked together to train the younger vampires, turning them from shadowy hunters into a disciplined fighting force. The humans of Blackthorn, once blissfully unaware of their vampiric neighbors, were slowly brought into the fold. Adrien addressed them directly, revealing the truth about the vampires and the greater threat that loomed. While fear rippled through the mortal population, it was quickly replaced by a grim determination. The villagers knew they could not face the alien threat alone. Together, the humans and vampires began to forge an unlikely alliance. Blacksmiths worked alongside engineers to craft weapons that combined human ingenuity with vampiric strength. Farmers volunteered their land for training grounds, while hunters scouted the forests for any sign of returning invaders. Weeks passed, and Blackthorn's transformation was complete. The once secluded village was now a hidden fortress, its defenses blending seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. The vampires and humans, once divided by secrecy and fear, stood united against the coming storm. Adrien stood atop the bell tower, surveying his domain. Celine joined him, her expression calm but serious. The covens are responding. Slowly, but they're responding. Adrien nodded. Good. We'll need every ally we can find. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, Adrien's gaze turned skyward. He could feel it in his bones, a storm was coming. But this time, Blackthorn would be ready. In the distance, a faint hum echoed through the air, accompanied by a flicker of green light. Adrien's lips curled into a faint smile. Let them come.